Buenos dias. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here today in Madrid, all the way from Vancouver. Have any of you been to Vancouver? No one? There's usually a couple in the crowd. It's really wonderful to be able to share some of my work and research on social and emotional education as a part of an essential of education. I want to give you, just before we start, I have 15 minutes, so I want to I have a lot to cover. There's a lot of information on this area of social emotional learning and education, and I'm really just giving you the tapas version of it, so you'll have little tastes of some of the important work that's being done. So one of the things that we know from research is that emotions are so important to how children develop, and their emotional life is an essential part of their development and how they develop. We also know that children's relationships with their families, with their teachers in schools are also important, and that children learn in social situations. We are human beings as social animals, really, and we need this aspect of these social connections with others to learn. We also know that emotions influence how we learn. We used to believe that there was simply a division between cognition and emotion, but we now know that emotions either help us learn or they impede our learning. Now, I will, Christopher was talking about questions, so I do have one quick question for you to see if any of you have the answer to it. It's not a test, don't worry. But I'm going to tell you a quote, and I want to see if anyone can guess who said it. Educating the mind without educating the heart is no education at all. Does anybody know who said this? Educating the mind without educating the heart is no education at all. It's a long time ago, really, really long time ago. Does anyone have any guesses? Or it was Aristotle. So this idea of social and emotional education has been around for a relatively long time. But it's really in the past decade or so where we have the science, the evidence now that really supports this notion that emotions are so important. Social and emotional education is essential. But why now? Why now do we need to be concerned about educating the heart and focusing on children's social and emotional education in addition to their academic achievement? We know now there's increased risks in our society and challenges that children face today, more so than other generations. We know there's poverty. We know also that children in previous generations had a whole community surrounding them, and now there are children who are losing that support given all sorts of changes that are happening in our society. We also know that children had many role models in previous generations, and role models that they could look up to try and emulate. And we know now there's now a loss of some of those role models. And who are the role models for our young people today? We also know that children today are exposed to violence in many different ways. I don't know if any of you know any children who watch video games. A few? I have two boys myself, and really the amount of violence both on TV and in video games is really astounding. There's so much more than previous. I remember there was a game that I read about where you can actually, with the hand controller, you're running after bad guys, I guess, trying to kill, and that you can, if you're strangling them, you can actually, through the controller, feel their heart rate drop until they're dead, just through the controller. They're trying to make it more and more realistic. And what does that do to our children when we have these kinds of experiences? Now, I'm going to tell you, does anyone know that Canadians really like hockey? Right? Hockey is a huge focus, ice hockey, a huge focus. And What happened in Vancouver last June was there was a big hockey game that happened. It was the last of the playoffs. And the 7th game was happening. They set up TV big screens all the way downtown Vancouver, and they showed the hockey game. And the Vancouver Canucks, the hockey team in Vancouver, lost the game. Within 1 minute, a riot broke out. Did anyone hear about this riot in Vancouver? It was all over the news. And these thousands of people, young people, were downtown Vancouver and set cars on fire and looted, broke into stores and stole things. And that was all over the media, how out of control our young people are. What wasn't in the media, however, is the next day they set up a Facebook page, and young people from all over Vancouver came downtown at 7 a.m. in the morning with their rubber gloves and their brooms and buckets to help clean it all up. So we really have to think of, when we talk about youth and the problems that are occurring, we also have to look at the positive and think of what are the positive aspects that are occurring. We also know that young people today are facing increasing mental health problems. In North America, 1 in 5 children and youth have a diagnosable mental health problem. And only about 20 to 25% of those children get the help that they need. We also know that children today we need to focus on addressing these mental health needs of children to see how to really prevent problems before they occur. So the question is, in trying to think of what can we do, what are the differences that make a difference? What can we do now to help deal with these problems? And I have one solution, and that's social and emotional learning, or social and emotional education, which is really a movement that is taking hold across the world right now. And a number of different areas are working on social and emotional education. One of the leaders in this, in addition to the Boten Foundation, certainly taking the lead internationally, is another organization called CASEL, the Collaborative for Academic and Social and Emotional Learning. And they have a wonderful website with lots of information available. And they talk about 5 dimensions of social and emotional learning that we all need to be aware of. And this includes things like social awareness, self-awareness, relationship skills, self-management, and responsible decision-making. Now, one of the things that we, there's my quote from before, that we also learned earlier this morning is the importance of neuroscience informing how children learn how their emotions work. We know that, for example, the prefrontal cortex, we know that you can train children to help them have more self-management and have them be able to regulate their emotions better. Now, there's some other research that I wanted to tell you about that a colleague of mine is doing on the idea of the social situation. Tom Boyce has actually looked at how primates get along. So he actually studied monkeys and found that hierarchies develop, you know, with the top of the leader in the primate and among monkeys and the lower ones. Well, he was very interested in finding that actually the monkeys at the very bottom of the social hierarchy actually had greater health problems. They had more issues that occurred with them. So he wondered, could you apply that to the classroom? Let's look at classroom hierarchies. So he started studying kindergarten classrooms and to figure out, does a hierarchy among the children develop? And what he found within the first 2 weeks of kindergarten, there is a hierarchy that develops with children at the top and children at the bottom. And what happens is that the children at the bottom have greater health problems than the children at the top. They actually had more cavities, more likely to have asthma. So again, it was a critical issue to look at. But you know what made the difference? The teacher. If a teacher had a classroom environment where he or she made sort of less competition, more collaboration, children didn't have those negative health effects. So it just shows teachers collaborating with each other. We also know that there are certain children who are biologically sensitive to context. So those children who in fact come into the world more sensitive. And if you put a child who's very sensitive to the environment in a negative environment, they actually become the worst of the worst. But then those children could be orchids, because if you put them in a situation in which it's flourishing, they also will go beyond even the children who are called dandelion children, who seem to adapt regardless of the circumstance. So some of the recent findings in social emotional learning, I'm just going to give you a couple of ones. One study actually found that grade 3 children's social and emotional competence was a better predictor of grade 8 academic achievement than was grade 3 academic achievement. So there's something important about social emotional education. Now, but what about programs? What about programs that promote social emotional learning? Well, there's a recent meta-analysis that just came out that finds that children who are in programs that promote social emotional learning are much more likely to not only decrease in their problem behaviors and all sorts of negative attitudes towards school, but they also improve not only in their social and emotional education and their understanding of others' emotions, but they also had achievement test scores that were 11 percentile points higher. And this is from a meta-analysis just released earlier this year of over 300,000 students. We also know from the research that having one adult in your life is important to you, having a significant adult. So I'm going to just tell you briefly what we've been doing at University of British Columbia because of the importance of social and emotional learning and what we know about the recent science. We've actually started a program that embeds social and emotional education in pre-service training. So our students sign up to be a part of a program in teacher training in which they are able to integrate and learn about social emotional learning about all their classes. So I'm going to read you my recommendation. Really is to have here, let me go back. I'm trying to read in Spanish here. So my recommendation is that all pre-service teachers, all teachers in teacher training should have social and emotional coursework. They should have a course on social and emotional education and also receive that training within their education. Now, one thing I want to do before I go, just to leave you, how many of you are teachers in here? How many of you work with children? A lot of you. Okay, I'm going to just give you one thing to do tomorrow. Are you going to go work? There's a situation that with a study you can do, whereas I want you each. Do you have any students who are annoying to you? Some who get under your skin? A few? No, come on. Is that a study found that if you take the time to talk to that child 2 minutes a day for 10 days about something positive, you will actually help change your relationship. So I want to put out that challenge. Thank you very much.